Oh yeah, we're live. Okay. After some small technical problems, we are live. We don't have a background image, and I'm in a different location. So, So welcome to the latest edition of the Data Value Show. No surprise to who's the guest now because we're already here. So, I'd like to welcome Jay Palmer. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. I'm glad to be here.
And I suppose I better let you know where I am because if you're on Vodafone, you're probably not listening to this because they've had an outage in the UK. So I have no mobile connection on my phone or at home. So I'm at, there you go. Hello, everyone. John Cook's place. So we have, luckily, he was in a short distance away that I was able to come here at a last minute notice. So that's what the data community was all about. All this looking after it. So today, my favourite topic, context, and why context is king, and why we think it's the building. Why it is the engine room for reliable AI. So before I go any further, so last time Jay was on the show, where were you working then, Jay?
A company called Snowflake, if you've heard of them.
I've heard of this company, but you're no longer there, are you, Jay?
No, I'm not. Actually, that's a very valid point. So everyone's probably remembered me as I was someone that did a lot of AI at Snowflake, but now I've transitioned for Leap Data or LEIT Data. I am now the head of AI and building the capabilities for them, and it's a great move.
Welcome, and I'm glad to have you. Glad to have you.
Glad to be here.
I suppose also you couldn't actually refuse doing the show as well, so there's some added benefits as well. So, but I suppose what I'm going to frame this is with I use the term context layer, and I'm not trying to invent something new. The term came from a little bit of annoyed on some LinkedIn posts of people like arguing semantics over an ontology, over a knowledge graph, over a vector database, over a business catalog, and I thought, well, collectively, what is it? It provides context. And and rather than us arguing over it, and then just the business becoming just even more disillusioned and separated from the data teams because they didn't know what we're talking about, trying to bridge that gap to give context to them. So, where do you see the evolution? We've had semantic layers in the 90s, and where do you think this is going now? So, what do you think is the direction we're traveling now, Jay?
So, if you look at so if we step back and talk about exactly what context is all about, right, and what it actually means, and in the analytics space, right, we've got data models. And there's certain context that we define on data models, right, about what they're trying to do. So, for example, the best context information we had on our analytics data was the grain of the way that we had built our facts, right? That defined the type of context and types of questions that we will answer. And if we didn't have the right grain, what would happen? We wouldn't be able to have the right answers to the right questions, or to a question which the business needed. And that now has evolved one step further and saying, actually, do you know what? The analytics space provides you with context with persistent data or long-lived data from that perspective, right? So therefore, you got a whole lot of history, and you can see that from one day to another, 1 month to another, 1 year to another. Now, with the way that things are going so quickly, now we've started to expand our ecosystem with additional long-term persistent data. And when we talk about persistent data, I'm being quite generic in that fashion, is because there's a lot of data that will be sit there long-term that gives context. Now, in your business and everyone's business, right, you've got a set of standards and definitions that you've always used, right? Like the definition in telco space for an active customer, for example. How often does that change? It changes once in a while, but regularly it's long-term data. So Chris, back to your point, right, is how it's changing is changing literally every major event in data. So we've got the analytics space, the ops space. Now we're looking at the AI space, right? And what kind of context do you have in AI? Generally, everything you have in AI has relevance or context. And we can probably talk about what that context actually is later on. But generally speaking, we've evolved in such a way now, context is even more important now in the AI world than it ever has been in the whole of the data space until now.
So it's quite a good point, really, and that's the length of time context is relevant for now.
Mm-hmm.
So before, and the tools we had to use back then were labor intensive, took a lot of time, could be seen as a silo or bottleneck for teams performing this stuff, but it didn't change that much. It was still worth the juice was still worth the squeeze, maybe, of how much effort and time that went into it. But now I think we've moved on to the fact that the old ways of doing semantic data modeling is no longer possible. You can't have a guy looking at a business object universe, mapping it all out in the GUI and then arguing over whether that was what relationship that was, and whether the foreign key should be named this way or another way, or whether he should have it as anyway, to go into too much sort of manual effort to go and create these things is no longer viable. It needs to be machine creatable and machine readable, whereas language or source readable, not just what they call it bundled semantic layer that business object worked with it, or Cognos went through its catalog, or Tableau's version of it, and so on. So I think it's the movement, how quickly things move. John, so John's here just to spice things up, really. So if anyone's been to any of the debates that we've had in the past, John, he's paid to make. Well, not paid at all, actually.
Hang on a minute. Yes.
He's challenged. He's tasked to actually create some bit of friction. So.
Yeah. Well, given we're actually looking at a graph ontology right as we speak.
That's what we do in our spare time.
Exactly right. No, I think this is absolutely right. So context is massively important. And as you said, if you go from sort of semantic layers of the BI world, which are really around metric aggregation and basically how to align metrics as well, we've now come very much further into context around knowledge graphs, around also mathematical context. You look at the way LLMs work; they're about mathematical relationships, not just static, but also you need. Give them hints because the probabilistic nature. When you add a knowledge graph onto that, it adds massive amounts of accuracy around that. So the context space has massively evolved, and as you said, there's people doing it manually doesn't work. Also, there's a dynamism around that. But to your point, if you look at 80% of the business processes of most organisations, they won't have changed materially in probably the last 5 or 10 years. Okay, there'll be spikes in the markets, this kind of stuff, but the fundamental processes won't change. So I think a lot of that business context won't change. There's an agility that needs to be on there, and then the static nature is absolutely right. I think that's definitely changed.
And something that if Shane Gibson's tuning in, or sorry, I got a sneeze, but oh dear, it's still going on today.
Not allergic to cats, so to do our cat.
Oh dear. If Shane Gibson's tuned in, or we rewind this at some point, listen to this bit, and he joined in the same conversation. It was one cicada, and we were talking about what we call the collection of these things that provide context, and we'll break down what I think some of these things are, and happy to debate and add other ones to it as well. But he calls it a knowledge plane, and then we're talking semantics right now. But it's okay. Well, layer, plane, grid. It doesn't really need to. Maybe your mechanism to distribute it is via a grid, via a plane, or that's fine. But first, we need to actually work out what you need at the right time, what provides the context for the use case you've got. And this is the thing that we always talked about. Oh, well, what data you need for your use case? Right. It's no longer just that. It goes, what data plus context, not only the freshness of the data, the accuracy of the context for the decision it's making. Because if you start making decisions that have financial impact to your organization or a reputational risk to your organization, like Vodafone at the moment, you need to make sure that you've got the right data that's going to make the right decisions, balanced to that associated risk. Marketing campaign, okay, maybe it doesn't need to be as accurate. It's not going to be catastrophic, but certain things you need to make sure that it is. So yeah, it adds a whole new dimension to the way you think about modeling a data product with AI in it now, because there's more pieces of the puzzle now.
Mm-hmm.
So let me throw some things in there. We will get on something spicy soon, I'm sure. But so the things that I see, maybe the order in which they probably go into creating that context layer. So firstly, it's as simple. It's your data model and the associated metadata with that provides with some good naming standards, with some good foreign key, primary key constraints, maybe some metadata tags on it. It provides some good solid context that you can build on top of. And I think data modeling is cool again, and Joe's latest book's hitting the streets soon, so I'm sure he'll be doing book signings around the world. I think it's turned into a trilogy, I hear, anyway. It's not just one book now. So
let me guess, physical, logical, and conceptual. Right?
No, you've got another one as well, probably.
Ron Silvergold.
Yeah, canonical. Canonical. Yeah, maybe so. Well, they'll add an extra layer in there as well. We haven't got enough precious metals to fill them all in, maybe. So yeah, I think that's the first bit. Me and you talked about this many times, John. I'll jump. It's the business processes. Okay, so now with those business processes, with just the bare minimum context I can derive from my data models, that adds a lot more value than just the data model on its own. So the ability to be able to join those two things up to provide that, where this is in the business process, what steps there are in that business process, who's responsible for that particular thing, how many the outliers. I think one of my presentations really is outliers are where you get mugged on the mean data streets. Is if you just do everything by the averages, you're not going to optimize for the outliers. So you always need to take into account all the scenarios, especially in your business processes. I think the other one is got to have your at the right time. You need a business glossary and you need to have a business catalog and probably a technical catalog that could be derived from your DDL to some degree. But then there's your ontologies when you start getting fancy, and when you're ready for it, when you take the training wheels off your bike and you're ready to go, you stick the ontology on it. What other things do you think need to go in there, and what do you think is the right order?
So the interesting thing you've just talked about, right? And if you categorize everything you just said, it only drives one thing, right? Generally, it drives the business from a business person's point of view.
Yep.
Right? That's what you just described it holistically in all the different shapes and forms. But what you're seeing now is that the technical teams have now built their own context layers, right, to help them do what they need to do, right? So the concept of vibe coding nowadays, right, is the fact that you can go in and just start building your own stuff, right? But the thing is, actually, if you know what you're building, you can probably get an output or a result from it. But will it be good? Probably not that great. Would it be secure? We know that one app recently was potentially vibe coded, but they had a whole security issue regarding what it could do and what it didn't do. So therefore, it takes a special type of context to build something great from a technical perspective. Ultimately, it will drive business value, right, to either monetary or non-monetary, depending on how you want to work.
Yep.
But realistically, we've now got a whole function now built regarding the context layers. So if you go back to the original statement I made originally, is data models were first produced in context with the grain of the table, which was only there for business users. Everything we've talked about from up to recently has all been to drive business. Now, with the concept of you don't really need good programmers nowadays because AI does it for you. This is what some people say.
Yeah.
But look, that's a different show altogether, right? But the way you look at it, right, you still need people to understand what's being built, how it's being built, and what the pros and cons of what's being done, right? But the thing is, there's people out there, like architects normally work in the data space. You need to define what the type of capabilities you want to build, right? What the pros are, what is these restrictions, what are these principles, right? All these things are gone into place already as part of the data management ecosystem, and architects do a good job in terms of that. Those now are being filtered down even further into these different context layers, and these context layers now, and it comes back to that term I was using before. There's long-term storage, right, and short-term storage. Long-term storage is things like, okay, fine, how do you do proper coding? How do you do like specific elements, like, like what's our namings, the patterns? How do you write static variables and all that kind of stuff? Like, it's like most developers have this in their toolkit at some point, right? But it's the technical area which has now exploded massively, back to your original point, and saying, okay, we've got the business stuff that's really taken off, the technical things taken off. But the thing is, because there wasn't that much good context around how to build things with AI very well, maybe that's one of the reasons why these quotations, which was just mentioned at the beginning of the show, saying that, oh yeah, 80% of AI projects have failed, or failed to drive value, to be more specific, right? It's because of the fact that they didn't have the right context to begin with to actually be successful. So now you've got both elements of the field that need to be there to drive success. You've got the business side of things, and you've got the technical side of things, and together, both those context layers within the same it's called a context layer, but you've got your business context layer and the technical context layer together, that drives that. That's the way I look at the way that world is going today.
That's a good point, actually, is like the separation from, go back to like the catalog world we've had, and for a while it's always been, these business catalogs or enterprise data catalogs, the Elations, the Calibras of the world, and it was always, the business lens on it.
Exactly.
And now with the introduction of Iceberg and other storages, and Glue was when I started it, probably with AWS. You had to have a technical catalog to point at where the data was, the manifest files, the pointers, all the stuff the business don't give them monkeys about. They want to know, well, what is this data? Is it correct? So those two worlds, I think, need to come together, and it should be a catalog that is managed and auto mapped. And go back to my point earlier, that the higher friction or more manual activities that you need people to go and do this stuff, it's never going to get done. So you need to make it as easy as possible for it to happen, to be automated as easy as much as possible, because otherwise it'll just, the context will be crap. Crap context, crap results. It's the same thing with crap data. So so we have that technical and that business lens.
Yeah.
And so some other things to throw into there, and Ole, he wrote his book, the Metagrid, and some of the stuff. I'll be honest, Ole, I will finish it. I will. I've skimmed through it a bit, but I've got the gist. But it was I talked about metadata. But it's the same thing about joining up all of this data that is about our data, which provides context. And there's technical context as well for your pipeline, how it is used, quality checks that may have been performed on there, who used it, when they use it, the frequency they use it. This is all metadata, but it's providing context about behavior. And it's the business. I think it's the business area that we need help with. We need to help the business understand how we do the right thing for them, rather than an AI vanity project, which is getting the bad name in the industry, because that's not what we do.
Go ahead, John.
No, I was just saying, what's interesting, I've been doing a lot of work with basically knowledge graphs straight from documents and straight from other sources, because you've talked about sort of the structured data world, which is where we come from, but obviously with AI now we're using the unstructured world. our perspective of ground truth, or the distance between ground truth and our use case, is actually shortened with AI. And it's something I find that, we are now pointing AI at documents, at raw data. We know it gets us there somewhere between 40 and 60%. I'm trying to read this document at the moment. It's getting me the way to build an ontology. But our ability to do that and our perspective around that, rather than throwing it over a bunch of people in a room, as you said, to do manually sort of joining all the stuff, we can actually now use AI to do that. But it's also challenging our own mental view around that. So you've got catalogs and that kind of stuff. So a catalog on a document, how does that actually work? If I'm trying to pick out triples and kind of semantic relationships in there, is it enough? So I think the thing about AI, it's really sort of changed that kind of world quite a bit. Yeah. And obviously our table stakes is our transactional data. That's got to be, that's a given. But now we start bringing in other contexts. Mapping a single custom view used to be a CRM practice. Now it's actually a full ontology. It's like, well, actually, how do we map those things together? So again, I think AI is really shifting the world around that.
Yeah, especially the fact that some of the graph stuff that looks, especially with AI, trying to find those patterns in terms of where those nodes didn't connect and so on, where they should be connected, and find those gaps and so on, and filling those is great. And I think it's really interesting, is because the past defines your context and how you should do the future, right? That's generally the case in everything, right? And it really reminds me of the things like how you build as an individual, as a person in your own career. Is like, if someone never told you that they've never made a mistake, would you trust them?
No.
You wouldn't, no, right? Because everyone makes mistakes. But the thing is making a mistake is not a bad thing.
No.
It's learning mistakes, right? It's what's more important. And the more mistakes you make, the more you learn. The more you learn, the better you are in terms of being less ignorant to the fact, right? And a lot of people, don't get me wrong, are ignorant to a certain degree, right, with a lot of things, right? That's, I know, is a big statement to make. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of people that don't know a bunch of stuff. At the end of the day, what you have to remember is that the people that are specialists have gone through the trenches, they've learnt good stuff, right? They failed. And the iceberg theory really is that important in terms of that context, because the story of that captain, right, that got was on a ship, right? The ship wouldn't move on, right? And they couldn't find out what's wrong with the engine. Then they called this guy to come fix it. He went down to the engine room, got with a little spanner, tapped on a few pipes, and the engine started working. And they gave the bill for, say, £10,000. Yeah. And he goes, you get £10,000 for tapping 3 times on a pipe? And he goes, can you break me down your work? He goes, what? It'll be £1 for just tapping 3 times.
Yeah, knowing where to tap.
It's for his experience. And I think it's a very, very good analogy in terms of where context really does come in, right? Because it's really interesting, because I'll say context is a subset of experience, right? That's probably a good way to look at it. And hopefully I've coined that myself, actually, to be fair. So we'll see.
There you go, you coined it. First.
So I think from that perspective, because your experience then defines what context and what view. And the personas are the same thing which we have in industry today, right? Everyone's persona is about the context and what they're looking for. So going back to your original point, I think, generally speaking, most of the stuff that I see, right, will revolve around these elements in sort of one shape or form.
So I think something we touched on when we were chatting, and we were talking about the ability to learn quicker now and fail fast as well.
Yeah.
There's also the cost of failing, which is can be negated in some degree with some guardrails or some guidance at the beginning. Yeah. But there's nothing. Experience is great from failing yourself because it's firsthand and you see it, you feel it. It hurts sometimes. But recently, I talked to Joe about this a little while ago, which is we're living in the world of subsidized tokens. Is that the VC world, like the days of Uber, and you get an Uber for £6 or $6.
Oh, they're gone.
It's like, oh my God, how did they even make any money? They weren't making money. They were spending VC's money on subsidizing it. But the same thing is happening at the moment and is starting to slow down. We use ChatGPT internally and the business edition. Yeah, for a while, you got as many deep knowledge searches as you like. It didn't cap you. Well, I never hit the cap, but I was hitting it hard. Yeah. Now, all right, you know, you got 10. You only get 10 per quota. 15. You know, they're a bit slower. You got to buy more. And you go in there, the first thing with the card, you could buy 15,000. No, hell no, I don't want to buy that many. So the next thing will be storage on these things, and now is the time to start using this stuff to work out how you get the right context at the right price as well. Because by building up this knowledge now that, you know, tokens are cheaper, if you're going to have to do this later and you're going to pay, you know, retail value for all this stuff, and you still don't know what you're doing, you know, you're gonna get a hefty bill to learn by those mistakes. So
also worth saying, the more context you provide, the smaller model you need.
This is something you mentioned, Jay, when we were out in what was it? The Snowflake, the Winter Data Conference, actually.
Yeah, that's right.
It's specialized. You call them specialized language models.
Or small language models.
So I think that they're definitely like, all right. I don't like the term small and large and so on, because I think I'm going to repeat what I said at the Winter Data Conference. Right? Who remembers the days of big data?
Oh,
right?
yeah.
No one talks about big data anymore. It's just data. It doesn't matter if it's small or large. It's all about data.
Jay, does that mean Big Data London needs to change its name?
It does.
On that front, yes, there's probably. Oh, yeah, let's just say yes. So from my perspective, then, so therefore, if you look at the same analogy in terms of this rest of the space, right? Language models, yeah, they were big, right, in comparison, but they're going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. At the end of the day, right? If you look at a data a capability map in your data, you don't have just one thing that talks about everything, right? You got your specific sub capabilities, right? In the LLM world, right, you have things like thinking and reasoning models and so on. So those reasoning models, they don't have to be massive, right? They just need to be reasoning really well, and each of these models has to do something really well and do specialized. So from that perspective, that's why I've always called them a specialized language model, because they're really good at one thing. And there isn't anything stopping you from using different models to do different things.
Yeah.
Right? It just comes back to how much time you have on finding out the right model for your right use case. And obviously there's an implied cost, obviously, to use some of these models as well.
If you're using them in the cloud. If you're not using them in the cloud, you're running on a nice big GPU box and just got down here, then it doesn't cost you anything, apart from the electricity.
It's a very pretty box, So looks like Vodafone have fixed the internet. My phone has actually finally picked up, so about 1,000 messages came through. But so back to this, specialized. Actually, maybe supporting Shane's theory about having a plane is that, if you can centralize a hub, or I'm not going to you, but have a central location where you're curating, managing, validating, even categorizing each of those different parts of that metadata, or that which provides you that context, and then give that to your specialist language models that is performing that particular activity. They're going to be much more highly performant. And I don't know, 80% of statistics are made up, but there was a recent one that was talking about, the power that ChatGPT 5 needs over 4. It was like 5 times the power needed, and it's only X much accurate. So they're reaching the limits of these generic models that do that, because you can throw more power at it, but it's not going to. The diminishing
law of diminishing returns.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's why you're here, John.
But it's also they're splitting the models up to both your points. Actually, ChatGPT 4 and 5 aren't one model. They're like 4 was about 8. Okay. 5's going to be more. There's a mixture of experts now have different, because they're multimodal. And so we're already in the world you're talking about, Jay, of specialist language models under the covers,
So that's absolutely right. And obviously the whole concept of sub-agents now, right, is the same concept applies. So we've taken, like, the mixture of expert models is great, right? It does a good job at active parameters at any one time. But the thing is, if you're going to keep changing, right, certain characteristics of some of these models, then do you update the whole model? right? Then that's interesting, right? But in the sub-agent world, you just need to update that one sub-agent. So therefore, what makes more sense in this world? Does it make more sense than actually to separate out each model that does really well for that ecosystem? And obviously the cost of that is less because two, right? One is the amount of tokens you're using from a prompt perspective, and obviously the context it requires is a lot less in comparison. So
and any regression or like checks or any degradation doesn't require
it's easily found.
Yeah.
A lot more easier. And I think this is why I've really stayed away from just using one model for everything. Don't get me wrong, it's great to have one model that does everything, but realistically, in the grand scheme of things,
we've been all looking for that model for a while, haven't we?
Yes, I know. But if you look at the human population in terms of how we work, right? Not one person's able to do everything correctly, right? If everyone has every knowledge, it doesn't work. We need a bunch of people. You know how teams work, right? Yeah. They all work in a very specific way. You've got your developers, you've got your architects, you've got your engineering teams, you've got leads that are managing those. All that is a function in which technically most of the agents should be using. And if there's anyone that, and the only addition that currently happens today with the AI world is this concept of a deep learning piece, which actually does deep research from this perspective, figures out the industry really well, what you're working in, categorizes that data and makes it available, right, in a specific way and form. So that's the only addition I see that AI is added to the team structure of it, because they need to know exactly what they're doing to be able to have the right results. So there's a whole bunch of stuff going on, but definitely back to, I think, the point regarding the mixture of experts model. Long term, I don't see that as being like as relevant to long term cost savings.
Well, even now, right? We're using chained and model routing, right? So we have 4 or 5 different models put together. We have, even putting standard AI model, ML models, like random forest classifier with an LLM to do the report generation. That's a much more cost effective. You can use a BERT model for the report generation. You can run that on your laptop. So there's a whole thing around. We're still, the big SaaS are still getting all the headlines, but actually there's so many use cases out there where you can chain these different models together.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to make one small point to that one, right? Is there's a whole bunch of people that think LLMs can do everything, right? And if you look at, they probably can do certain things, right? But don't forget the standard machine learning type of models that you can build as well, right?
Yep.
They're going to be a lot cheaper, more manageable, and they'll provide you a lot more visibility.
Or even Excel with a case statement in it. It can do some of the things that people try and do that. So you can dumb it down even more sometimes. But,
right, tool for the job, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So in that case, like, just don't forget, right? LLMs are not the only thing that can do stuff, right? Definitely. If your main requirement is to do classification, right, types of regression work, traditional ML models can do it. LLMs can do it, and people have done it, use it for that. But it's an expensive way of doing it, especially if you're running against 1,000 data points constantly.
So there's. I think, I'm going back to something we made earlier about business processes.
Yeah.
And and agentic approaches to stuff. So if you're able to identify your business processes and actually get the real ones, rather than like Meggie speaks to Sue and goes speak to like Bob who goes over there, that sometimes if he's not on lunch, he doesn't come in late on a Thursday, so you have to watch out. But you'll get his sign off on the Friday. And why is it always late when Bob goes? Oh, that's different. So you don't get the real story of like what a business process is until you really look into it and you find those outliers. But then if you look at, and it's again looking at use cases, and you look to say, okay, what things are the easiest for me to go and use an agentic process to optimize that?
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's something that gets overlooked, and this is probably where all the CEOs are thinking, I can just replace and automate everything. I make X amount of saving.
The Klarna issue, right?
Yeah, and I suppose it's a good example of, if you remove your call center and remove the cancel button, the unsubscribe, you're going to actually increase your attention for a short period of time until the watchdog agency or something like that come and close you down. So And I think it's the personal aspect that the individual provides, because we do business with people. You know, it is still a relationship based world we live in. And if you look at, okay, well, yes, I could automate that, but the negative consequences for automate that, does that outweigh any benefits? Should I just focus on the ones that, you know, the client's not going to know, it's been automated, they get a better experience, but they still have a element of a personal touch, rather than going, you know, full in and just trying to do the whole lot?
It comes down, so what you're saying, I mean, I've had a couple of conversations with other people around this already, and it comes down to the concept of a word beginning with T, and it applies to data and it applies to a lot of things. It's trust.
Yep.
Right. Now, if you know you're not talking to a real person and you find that out, right, what happens to the trust element of that conversation?
Right, and every other conversation I have afterwards. Like, my God, is anyone real now?
That's another point. That's another conversation I'll have with you separately. But generally speaking, right, it's that trust element, because if you are going to have a talk with someone, let's have it with a real someone. If every person, which is an autonomous agent that is talking to someone on the phone, clearly articulated that I am a bot, right? I'm not a real person, and I'll be able to have a first line support if you've got any questions, and made that statement. Therefore, a person knows what they're getting themselves into.
Yeah.
Right? And if they want to talk to someone, that's fine. But companies shouldn't be leveraging this without informing individuals when they do call that this is not a human being. And it comes back to that concept of ethics, right? And AI and so on. There's a whole bunch of stuff that we have, but as people, we don't like to be technically lied to as someone's pretending to be human. I'd rather have a bot that sounds like a bot, than someone trying to act human, but technically they're trying to lie to me to make me trust them, which is not a nice way to look at it.
Like I said, it's the Klarna issue. Klarna basically tried to automate agents their whole customer service, and didn't realize their customer service was actually a key USP for them, because they had a very deep relationship between the customer service and their customers. So they forgot, like you said, the user experience, and they forgot the product in a way. I mean, I think it's even more than just the ethics. They fundamentally forgot what part of their product is. So I think there's definitely a, you know, it feels like RPA 2.0. It's like we're just trying to throw some, you know, it becomes a cost per head issue rather than actually, are we genuinely improving our business operations or our product? And that's the thing that can get lost.
And that comes back to I was going to say, that comes back to the long-term storage in terms of how things are as well, doesn't it? So that's good. Sorry, Chris, you were saying.
No. It's just, you know, this is unscripted, as probably people can tell anyway. So, but this is why it's so good. It's so we talked about the business processes, which, you know, is less in our control to help with that, but, you know, we can help sell the art of the possible, but, you know, it's not in our control directly in data teams. But what is in our control is our software development lifecycle, or our data development lifecycle, or our knowledge development lifecycle. So I think that's, you know, something we can do, and maybe that's part of the foundations of demonstrating what, you know, the art of the possible to the business. If we can look to see, just from our individual processes, you were talking about having agents doing different things. You know, even me with my limited knowledge, I've got things that are, you know, automating doing stuff which I never even thought I'd be able to do. Yeah, and, you know, it's being able to map it out, and it's that good old architecture thinking or requirements thinking, and maybe all the mistakes in the past as well, experience that helps you bring all these things together. So how do you see that changing? That's in our control. Do you see that happening more? And I know this is probably a loaded question, really, but how do you see that changing then?
I think there's two ways of looking at systems as a whole. A bunch of individual components, or a system as a whole, right? I take you've had this conversation already. But you're mute, Chris, just to let you know. Oh God. Okay,
I'm
fine.
going to sneeze again.
So as
apparently giving germs and that as well, like stealing his internet. Share more.
okay, so as individual systems, right? I think you can do a lot to improve those type of things, but as a whole system, I don't think you can actually get one output or one result to be able to say, okay, this is one real view of what you're looking at. I'm being really generic at the moment because there's a lot of context which is required for a lot of these things. Great. Okay, good. That's required. So realistically, like if you had to ask that question differently and you put some additional context in it, what would be the key thing I should be attentive to, if for the technical people out there, what their attention should be?
I missed the question. What was a bit of the question?
I think that was a technical joke that went too far, to be honest.
I think that's what happened. I was context switching. That was well, right.
I mean, are you talking about this concept of different views that people have on top of? Yeah, and I think this is something that's been very close to my heart for the last probably 10 years. You know, data is in the eye of the beholder, and what it's representing can be different things to different people. So, you know, a load of payments can be for a finance person that's money in the bank to a to a salesperson. They can look, actually, that's what my future order book looks like. But they have a different view on it, and I think that's something that's, when we talk about context, there's kind of the core business process that runs whatever organization you're running, but then there's the views on top to be able to actually, with your use case and with your perspective, you need to be able to overlay onto it. And with AI, obviously, then now you're extracting patterns out, multi-dimensional patterns, statistical patterns, that kind of stuff, plus graph patterns, plus causal. If you talk to Mark Stoos and Bill Schmarzo, they're very much in the causal space. This ability to overlay different views on top of it is a massive part of the context playing ecosystem. Whatever you call it is, you know, in my perspective, I know. But
I also think the concept of like in the persona world, we call them, and like from text to structured data world as well, there's things called synonyms that we use for most of our models. So words and stuff that mean the same thing, right? And I think having those type of capabilities to mean it's the same stuff, is just different definitions, comes back to the whole concept we defined previously as part of the business glossary, right? Because business glossary is technically, it's in the word. It's the business way of looking at things. But I've already mentioned now we've got whole technical streams happening that talks about how technical stuff now needs to be built. And each technical area, right, for long-term and short-term storage needs a mechanism to be defined about what it is. Now, I don't know if you've seen this new like way of working with agentic systems now, right? Is most software delivery practices nowadays, right? Especially in the technical front. What do you normally do before you start building stuff out from an engineering perspective, right? What would be the things you normally think of?
Well, you need to work out what to build first of all, right? You need to go
but before you do that, the engineering team usually has a bunch of SOPs that they build, right? Or create, right? Or these are design patterns. This is how you These are branching strategies. There's all these things that do. These are best practices.
Yes, DLC,
Yeah. So, but in terms of from the context of the engineering team, right? And so this is what we normally do. So the engineering team have their own way of doing things. The architecture teams have their own way of doing things, right? The thing here is what you're starting to notice, that instead of building stuff inherently with MCPs, right, that now these tools have access to, they actually can look at where you store these documents in terms of how things have been working, and that provides additional context in terms of the system. So what normally happens, and it comes back to the whole concept of prompt engineering, right? Originally, prompt engineering is a big thing. Now it's all about context engineering, which is great. And I love the whole word because I've been banging on about that for ages. But the whole point here is that you're getting your additional context in about what is actually already been defined for every project anyway. We're just reusing that to actually deliver that additional context to drive the end result, which is more favorable to what you're looking for than actually trying to rebuild stuff constantly with agentic workflows, which they may do things your way, they may not. And if they don't, do you trust that pipeline then because they don't follow your best practices?
So I'll go back a little bit on something, and we were talking about how we worked in the past in the BI world. You know, everyone had KPIs or OKRs or whatever, and you're measured by these things. And they were seen as how your department's doing, you know, very set by that particular department. But very rarely were they all aligned, and one didn't actually have, you know, one team chasing this metric didn't have a negative effect on maybe the company making profit, or, you know, maybe another department it being a success. And and that's how we operate in the past, and people have bonus on it as a way that we help people accountable for stuff. You know, you have targets, right? And, you know, some of that world still exists. But I think if we're now able to, you know, use it, you know, the agentic capability, capture all this information, provide all that evidencing, get rid of all the KPIs, and just look at what's the right thing we need to focus on in our organization to optimize that's causing a problem at the moment. So, and I don't know, maybe it's org structure issues on how people are remunerated causes this problem. But if it is that one team or one, you know, if you can incentivize people in the same way, that's actually how the business needs to operate now, you know, you're going to get more bang for your buck.
But you need to align people to end, right?
Oh, yeah.
And this is, I think, this is one of the agentic thing, right? Agentic is a business process tool, really.
Yeah.
It's not a data tool anymore.
No, it's not.
You're building end to it, and you can apply them to data practice, SDLC development, whatever you want. But it's actually an end-to-end business tool. I wrote a post about this on over the weekend. It's like, actually, we're going from sort of data-driven to what's use case-driven. That's what AI and agentic is doing. So that incentive you're talking about, alignment, is really important. I've got a friend who runs he's head of data science for a large commodity trading firm. He's got 100 people in his team. He's got 60 data engineers. He's got about 20, 30 data scientists, product managers. They built their own stack, and he delivers. They're only running 15 models, but they are delivering multi-million-pound trading strategies for the traders. But he's got the entire team in one go. He's got his own stack, his own platform. It's all aligned, to your point, end to end. Obviously, that's not the same for every organisation. You can't put the whole one organisation, one department. But it's interesting when you see that alignment from a commercial business-facing kind of leader all the way through, and you align the whole thing together. Now, you can do that obviously with different organisations. But that's what agents are now starting to force people to do, in my mind. So there is a bit of a shift going on, I think, from the kind of the traditional data teams you talked about.
No, there is. I agree with that point, but there's like a whole bunch of other things that we also need to look at as well, right? For a business to say they're moving the needle in that term, right? Everything needs to be quantifiable to a certain degree, right? Now, when most people talk about, oh, they're building AI systems and so on, right? First, they need to understand what the current TCO is of what they're doing today, right? And what you normally find is that a lot of companies don't actually quantify what the current process is today and what their cost is and what output they produce. And then if you go back to the corporate OKRs and so on, then how does it map for what they're doing back to the OKRs and how that actually looks like? And until you do that within an organization to actually know what the inputs, the outputs, really looking at the TCO part of it is, and quantifiably measuring these things, right? It becomes a lot harder to look at the value proposition of the AI work that you've done, right? Because don't get me wrong, right? This team, like John, to your point, could be bringing in like multi-million worth of revenue and so on, which is great, which is really good, right? Before they could have been bringing in very similar amounts already, and they've just transitioned to this whole AI workflow that they've got. They're burning a bunch of tokens now, so the cost has gone up. They're bringing in the same amount of revenue, so overall the business has actually been detrimented a little bit because the amount of profit they're making is less. So from the purpose of looking at things holistically, it's all about, in architecture we call it the current state architecture and future state architecture, right? That's what you normally talk about.
Mr. TOGAF's coming out now, isn't he? Eh?
So, and for this perspective, you need to be able to say, okay, this is what the benefits of the current solution is, and then what most good architects will do, they'll give you a maturity on what the current maturity is. There's a whole bunch of things that we do. So we do the same thing with AI capabilities today for most organizations. right? No, because what you want to do when you move in the needle, especially in the AI space, you also have to move the needle in the data space.
Yeah, they're linked, right?
Yeah.
They're much closer now, right?
They have to be, right,
Yeah,
for it to be a success. So from this perspective now, this is why when you look at AI, obviously everyone knows you have to look at data as well, but some people forget, right? And you need to be able to quantify, right, what the value proposition is, what you're currently doing, and then looking at how much extra this would be. Is it more or less? And most people forget that piece of work. And the number of C-level executives I have this conversation with right now, it's they agree with it, but the thing is, it's very hard to actually put it in practice unless it's coming from top down directly, and everyone's been qualified from that point of view. But that's me. I'll stop.
No. TCO is like another favourite term. We're going to talk about what's it called? RTO and RPO as well at some point.
Yeah.
But it's a good point because no company ever probably has an honest TCO, because if it's an old, if you go to the on-premise days, or even the first ones went to the cloud, they wouldn't be able to do the cost attribution to everything that's on there. They're probably funding it by one project to go and get the capital expenditure sign off to go and get that, and then the accountant's going, okay, we'll sign this one off. We'll. So there's a accounting lens of the TCO,
correct,
and then there's probably a true real lens. So if we are in the world where people have gone down that route, have good at FinOps and rechargeable, then they're in a better place of, okay, right, now I can actually evidence the saving I'm making from these activities. I can even evidence the cost of training locally on this stuff, sending it across. Ingress charges is worth the bang for the buck because the cost of the GPUs are constant because I've got them under my desk. Or in a safe storage location with a decent a backup unit, obviously. That's the problem. Is you go in there. It's very hard in the past, and I use this term is business value is an evidenceable positive effect on the business objective.
Yes,
but it's very hard for people to actually provide that evidence historically. You might be able to do that point in time going forward. I suppose it's where digital twins come into it. Hey,
it's interesting, isn't it?
We're not digital twins. No, he's much taller than me.
Okay, go off my chair. No, I think this is absolutely right. So I think this is the TCO thing. I've worked in management consulting for a while, and they're talking about TCO. I've never ever seen anyone measure real TCO.
No.
You get cost.
I do it. You do it to get budget.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. And as these kind of things we're talking about, like, and one of the questions would be that sort of friction you talk about, to measure how much is that an organizational legacy construct, right? And I did a post about this on LinkedIn around, do we need to reorientate teams, data teams, and kind of stuff of legacy organizational things, right? If we orientate, if we're saying actually the headwinds are data's compressing with AI is going into use cases, so we're actually starting to compress the entire delivery model to a degree. Do we need to start looking at how our organizations are and our delivery models work? So if you start talking about end-to-end delivery process, which we talk about genuine product management, we actually start delivering real products which actually have business cases and actually have business things around, and you orientate the teams around that, your data team, your tech team, your business teams, and these kind of multidisciplinary delivery streams. You don't necessarily have to change the org chart, but you change the delivery process. Actually, then you start getting into much more of that TCO, because you can actually measure that product by product. But again, that's a big shift. But it's like agents are now starting to kind of really form that. So I want to do an agent to run my marketing campaign. I need to get data from here, here, and here. I need to get business process from here and here. I need to go into these different systems. I'm starting to already do that, having to go into cross systems. I have this massive coordination effort.
Yeah.
The good conversation over the weekend around how do you actually coordinate all this team together, and you might have 15 different departments you've got to put together. It's like, well, hang on, this doesn't make any sense. There's actually organizational friction in that. So I do think actually over the next 5-10 years you'll start seeing the organizations shift around these models.
I think I use the term platform gravity, and I think that there's probably the people aspect of delivery that platform part is the fact that you had these satellite planets all around doing different things. So you had your business objects team, or your ab initio team, or they're all, it's mono platform now. It's all runs on Snowflake. So you bring it's a small, well, the skills and the team are now more integrated, and the AI is coming to it, the data products are coming to it. We'll just have one big platform soon. That's it.
Yeah, we are. But if you look at all the stuff that's happened though in the space, not just the AI space, the data space, right? Is there's this term of time to value, which we've talked about in the past, right? And everything we've done to date has to shorten that time to value in one shape or form, like building the data domains and building data products and so on off the back of it, right? So then you've given responsibility to separate domain teams, right? They can build stuff independently, and then you can reduce your time to bringing that data in, because now you've federated that across the estate, which means that there's more the delivery points that are happening at the same time, right? And the more and more you can do that, the quicker it would be. The AI concept is exactly the same, right? What you're doing is you're trying to reduce the concept of your time to value from an X number of days, which most people are working on, and bringing that down. And that's where most use cases nowadays, when you're looking at, okay, fine, we've got this use case, they always ultimately the fundamental premise is time, on how long it takes to do certain things, right? That's generally the case which it is. There's only a few cases which it's actually been like really interesting that I've seen, whereby it's not used just from a time perspective, but it's actually been to build something which actually is actually really cool. Yeah. And like, for example, the music side of things, right? With the Beethoven's all his works he's ever done. And then I think I can't remember exactly, is it a 12th symphony or something like that, or 9th, or it's one of those symphonies that never actually finished.
The unfinished symphony.
Yes, the unfinished symphony. Then yes, let's call it
aptly named. It provides context and name, didn't it?
So the funny thing is that there was an unfinished symphony, and they ran it through a model, gave it all the information it had from previously, and asked it to finish the unfinished symphony. And what I'm hearing at the moment is that it did a really good job in finishing it off. And that's actually quite nice, because there's no time to value component of it. It's just
he'll be happy where he is.
It's just a nice thing to be.
Not sitting in his grave.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's
the royalties.
It's back to the point, right? It's like there's generally, it comes back to the time to value piece, which is like, okay, fine, how do you improve value? Now the thing here is that if you look at how we're accelerating today, we're accelerating so quickly, right? And we're getting quicker and quicker and quicker. So what we've done in the last 2 years is probably taken the last 10 to get to this point.
Yeah.
Hence, we're just going to be driving this faster and faster as we process. But I know it's almost hit time, so I will shut up.
No. And this just add to that one, and we could talk for hours. I was like, anyway, but that speed to value. I think there's another thing to take into account for it, because the speed to value is one lens, but it's also the force multiplier effect it creates. And maybe not from that particular one. It's like two things, speed to value, I do that. But that enables me to get a force multiplier effect that combining those two things together, the sum of the parts is worth more. Sorry, the sum of the parts is worth more than the individual. Yeah. Now I call it, I've moved the fulcrum, which is the fulcrum but it was a Millennium Fulcrum. But yeah, you're right. We're on time, and I know anyone that's been missing these shows. If you haven't, well, I don't know why you're here now, but no, maybe you'll come back again. We've had had a few. We've been too busy with Big Data London and lots of other things going on. So I'll be getting back into the regular routine and get some other guests on soon. So I'm pretty sure we've got some more lined up. I just don't know who though. Anyone in London, 29th of October, the Loki London Data Meetup is in a normal place, so check out the website for that. You know where to find us. Thanks everyone. And ladies, I can't even stop the show because I've come around and Paul had to let us in, who runs marketing. So I think he might have to stop the show. So. Yeah,
he might do. But there's one thing I'll give someone a nugget. I recently read a nice paper called Agentic Context Engineering that was released last week, actually. And let's put it to summarize it in a nice way. It's about how, instead of like changing a model, it's about how you change your prompts and your definitions and so on, using observability for AI as a way doing prompt engineering or context engineering.
Yeah.
It's a really good paper, so take a look at it.
I will read that.
Look forward to seeing everyone's reviews on it.
Self-adjusting context.
Yeah, and obviously a special thanks not only to my special guest Jay, but also my special host as well, John, who at a short notice enabled me to do this. So Vodafone's back, so I've got to go and do some meetings now and catch up my emails I didn't do earlier.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
No, I had no choice really.
Yeah.
Thanks
I said thank you anyway.
No, he's too polite, John.
All right,
Thanks
good.
again, Jay. I'll catch you
Thanks
soon.
very much.
Take
care. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Let me just hang up. I don't know if it leaves. Might have it leave studio.